deadline week, so welcome inside the Red Mile Rundown, where myself, Johnny Stope, the host of the podcast, along with my co-host Robert Munich, will break some stuff down for you today as we chat trade deadline week and Flames road trip as well in here as well. Robert, how are we doing today?
We're doing great. Happy trade deadline week to you. Happy trade deadline week to everybody listening. Later on in the show, we're going to look at some of the Flames trade deadline history. And oh my God, let's just hope and pray Craig Conroy does a better job than his predecessors. Oh my God.
They're going to ugly. You're going to love the work the Flames did.
It's so bad.
This I would put as a top 3 week for me. It's horrendous. This would be a top 3 week for me on the NHL's calendar. Where does it rank for you, Robert? I'm quite high on trade deadline week. So many rumors, so many moves, just a ton of fun this week for me personally.
Yeah, between the trade deadline, the draft, and free agency, they're all pretty similar for me. I'd probably put trade deadline probably second. I love the draft personally. I know there's not like a ton of movement that happens at the draft anymore, but I just love seeing teams select their future players. I just think it's so much fun. So yeah, I'd probably go the draft 1, trade deadline 2, free agency 3. But it's very exciting.
Any opportunity to geek out on hockey and talk about what could be, what could transpire, the possibilities of player X moving to team Y, or this guy moving. It gets me excited. It gets me really geeked out. And my wife calls me a hockey geek for it. And I wear that crown with pride because it is a ton of fun to watch. So this week, the Flames, we'll get into this in a second here, but the Flames have a lot. We'll have a lot to say about trade deadline day, I think. Before we get there, Robert, the Flames actually played some hockey. It was quite nice to watch 3 Flames games in 4 nights as they hit the road in California. They win 1, they lose 1, and they have a shootout loss also in there. I'll get your thoughts on this weekend here in a second, Robert. But for me, this weekend was all about the goalies. I thought Dustin Wolf and Devin Cooley were tremendous for the Flames. The reason why the Flames got 3 of 6 points on this road trip, the reason they were in all these hockey games were because the goaltenders were just dialed in. How impressed were you by this goaltending duo on this road trip, Robert, and what stood out for you as well?
Yeah, you're right. I agree. I think the reason that they did pick up 3 points was because of the goaltending. I take a look at the first period against the Sharks, and Dustin Wolf was just remarkable. Mm-hmm. Probably the best period of hockey he's played all season, and he kept the Flames in that game for the majority of it. He's single-handedly pretty much kept them in it against LA. The Flames were really leaky defensively against the Kings, and Dustin Wolf was just incredible. And then Devin Cooley just continues to do what Devin Cooley does. I mean, He's having a remarkable season, and on Twitter, JFresh, who's like a big analytics guy, he just posted something just about 20 minutes ago showing the top 10 goaltenders by goals saved above expected this season, and Devin Cooley is 4th in the NHL. Devin Cooley started 17 games this year, and he's in the top 10 of goals saved above expected with guys who are all starters for their teams. Like Karl Vejmelka plays every game in Utah, Spencer Knight, Igor Shesterkin, John Gibson, Vasilevsky, Thompson, Sorokin. He's in the mix with all those starting goalies, and he's only played 17 games this year. He's literally having one of the great goaltending seasons we've seen from a backup goalie in a long time. So yeah, the goaltending was tremendous on this California road trip.
One other player like Devin Cooley was tremendous against Anaheim. I think he was the reason they almost won that in the shootout. That was a ridiculous goal by McTavish. But one player that also stood out to me this weekend, Robert, and I'm pleasantly surprised because I've taken a few runs at this guy. I even took one on text between you and I before he scored a goal. Nazem Kadri, is he back? Because he looked pretty good this weekend for me.
Yeah, he looked like a guy who knew that he was getting showcased a bit, and he knew that scouts were going to be watching him, and maybe he's hoping to kind of pump up his trade value a little bit to get out of Calgary here. And I honestly wouldn't blame him for that, but I'm right there with you. I thought in all 3 games, he was probably the Flames' most dangerous player, is either him or Matvei Gridin. Kadri, he had the confidence back. He had the swagger back, the dangles, the scoring chances. He was a shooting machine. So yeah, everything that you come to expect from Nazem Kadri, he provided in the California road trip. And the Avalanche were in the building on Sunday night in Anaheim and got a firsthand look at some of the dangerous moves Kadri was making. And I think he'd be a perfect fit in Colorado. But yeah, he was really good. He compared to the last 20 games, it looked like a completely different player.
It did, and he was drawing penalties as well. Like, so when he's engaged, like he was on this weekend, drawing penalties, shooting that puck, elevating his line. I think Connor Zary looked really good this weekend too because of what Nazem Kadri was doing. He was having such such confidence with the puck that Zary and Farabee both benefited a lot by playing alongside him. Thought the line was really good this weekend, and the Flames, I think, might have frankly deserved a little bit better this weekend. If you're looking at strictly just getting results from how they were playing, they should have earned a point, if not both, against Los Angeles. So just really good performance by Forsberg. Maybe they deserved a better fade against Anaheim Sunday night. So you could kind of make a case that the Flames could have got 4 or 5 points instead of just a 3 on this road trip. And it was led because the big dog decided he was going to show up and be engaged again. It was really good to see. We also saw the return of Blake Coleman to the lineup. He played away from Backlund for the first little while, and then he was put back with Backlund. And it was like the hand fanned the glove again, and those two just went and they tore off some more really impressive play in both ends of the ice. They didn't get a ton of points for it, but it was nice to see Blake Coleman back out again. What did you make of his game and maybe him pumping up his trade value this weekend for the Flames?
You know, I don't understand why they would ever separate those two guys. Even if, you know, Coleman's on his way out here and they want to kind of spread things out, I would still have Coleman and Backlund together as long as those two players are on the same team.
But Robert Sharangovich has been better.
Oh, don't even get me started on Sharangovich. But I thought Coleman was just okay. I didn't think he was. I thought he was pretty physical and he worked hard, but I didn't think that he, you know, played all that incredible. A couple of the other guys that stood out for me. One was Matt Gridden. I
was about to go there too.
Super impressed with him. The fact that he just turned 20 years old, but he's basically been a 19-year-old all season. The fact he's doing what he's doing at this age, at this level of experience in the NHL, you know, like this season, he's only played in 16 games this year. And he's already, like I said, he's already one of their most dangerous players, if not their most dangerous. And the thing I love about his game is that his playmaking is just as good as his shot. And I think that type of player is so valuable because not only can he score, you know, he's, like I said, he's got the terrific shot. He's got great offensive instincts. He knows what he's doing. So not only can he do that, but also he makes his teammates better with the passes that he makes to them. Like over the last 3 games here, he set up his line mates and his power play mates for like really, really good scoring chances. And either, you know, like a guy like Matt Coronado just hasn't been able to kind of corral the puck and put it in the back of the net, or they miss, or they're not expecting it because it's such a great play. Those are the types of things that you don't normally see from a 19-year-old player who's only got 16 games in the NHL so far. So I think it's incredibly exciting what we've seen from him. And I think the sky's the limit for him. I could see him being a first line winger in the NHL one day, you know, putting up anywhere between 60 to 80 points, depending on the season. I'm just super impressed. And even if you go check out my Twitter account, I put out like a highlight tape of the last 3 games and just the plays he's been making. And they're really, really strong, really creative. So I loved his game on this road trip. I thought he was great.
The hockey IQ for a kid that just turned 20 this past weekend is pretty remarkable. Like, you think back to when you were 19, 20, I'm not sure I had the IQ that Gridden has shown on the ice. He looks like he's been in the league 7-8 years. He knows what it's about. He knows his role. He knows how to get the most out of his game and out of his line mates at 19. Like, that's just ridiculous to me. And he's been really, really good. And it was a shame that Ryan Huska didn't feel like we feel about Gridden and didn't play him a ton in that third period and didn't snip the ice in overtime against Anaheim, because I think he could have been the difference. But overall, I think what you're seeing in the growth from Gridden is you're seeing a guy who the Flames, they picked him in the draft for a reason, and they drafted him for the skill, and you're seeing why they drafted him and the use of that skill. Just wildly impressive from the young man. I was also impressed by another young man on the blue line. We've talked about him before, Robert, a lot. Is Kevin Ball getting enough love? I know he doesn't play the sexy style of the two-way game or offensively like Cale Makar does, but this guy is a warrior. Takes a puck to the face on the weekend, just comes back like ho-hum, whatever. No big deal to him. He's in the right spots, it seems like, every single time he's on the ice. It doesn't matter who he's playing with. And I think he's actually calmed Uyghur down a little bit the last couple of games playing with McKenzie and allowing McKenzie trying to get back to what he is supposed to be and what he can be as a defenseman. What'd you make of Kevin Ball's weekend? Because for me, I'm quite pleased with what we've seen from number 7.
I'm really pleased with what we've seen from him this season for sure. I found the last 3 games that like he was good, probably not quite as good as he was before the break, and I actually think playing with Mackenzie Weegar is part of that because Mackenzie's having just such a rotten season. It seems like no matter who you put with Weegar, their numbers start to kind of crater a little bit. Like as a pairing with those two on the ice together, the Flames, they've been outscored this season 7-5. Scoring chances are 73-43 for the opposition. High dangers are 31-24 for the opposition. So I think it was probably more of a Weegar issue than a Ball issue, but overall this season you have to be super, super happy with Kevin Ball. I mean, he's turned into a legit top 4 defenseman. One of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL, just using his stick, his size, his physicality. So yeah, I'm with you. I think he's been really good. A couple other defensemen I thought played well were Zach Whitecloud and Yan Kuznetsov.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was probably the most solid we've seen Kuznetsov in a while. And once again, it might have had something to do with not playing with Mackenzie Weegar as much. I really, really like Kuznetsov's game. And Zach Whitecloud, like what's the gap between Whitecloud and Anderson? I think offensively, obviously Anderson was a lot more of a dynamic player and scored a lot of goals for the Flames, but defensively, like I think they're almost like on par, and on the penalty kill, I think they're almost on par. This Rasmus Anderson trade just looks better by the day because you get the 2 high picks. You get Zach Whitecloud, who I don't think is that much worse than Rasmus Anderson, and then now you get Abram Wiebe, who's also been lighting up the NCAA. So that trade's looking really good. So yeah, really liked Whitecloud and Kuznetsov's game this weekend as well.
Yeah, me too. I like how calm Whitecloud has been for the Flames. He's not going to bring the offense Rasmus Anderson does, but like you mentioned there, Robert, I think he's the same as Rasmus Anderson. He's positionally sound. He's got a good stick. He can move the puck quite well. I think he's a better puck mover than I thought he was. Admittedly, didn't watch a ton of Zach Whitecloud in Vegas, but I think he comes as a better than advertised player. Like this is a guy that the Flames acquired for Anderson. And a lot of people, including myself, are just thinking, flippable asset, right? A guy that we just can move along, get ourselves another mid-ish round pick and have another lottery pick. This guy actually might be a leader for the back end for the Flames for more than a few years here. This guy is he's making a case anyways to be one of those guys that is counted on by Ryan Huska. He's got the trust of teammates already. You can tell that guys like playing with him. You can tell that guys playing for him. And not much more you can ask from Zach Whitecloud. Now, if you could tip in a few goals, that might help out his value a little bit more. But at the same time, that's not his game. He's just a reliable guy on the back end, and I think he's allowed Kuznetsov to kind of settle in, like you've mentioned. It's not to rag on Mackenzie Weegar. It's not to say that he's a bad defenseman. He's got the luck of nothing going on right now. Just this year is just not going well for him. In any sense or any form, any way you look at it, it's just a tough season for 52. And to see Kuznetsov thrive alongside Whitecloud has been nice. It's been good to see because I am a big fan of Kuznetsov and what he brings to the Flames. A 1-1-1 weekend, Robert. It really does say Calgary Flames hockey if you come away 500 on a 3-game road trip as we head into this weekend, the trade deadline. Does the view of this weekend change anything for you? Has the Flames head towards the trade deadline, or is it status quo for you? Let's trade some guys out here and let's keep plugging away at getting this team younger with more bodies and more draft picks and get all these assets in tow here.
Yeah, I mean they could have won those games 30-0 each night, and it still wouldn't have changed my mind. This team should be in sell mode. They should be trying to do everything in their power to move out. I would say at least 3 or 4 bodies should be moved out this deadline, whether it's Kadri, Coleman, Hanley, Pahal, Weegar, Farabee, Frost, whoever you want it to be. I think that they need to look at making at least 3 moves just to continue to add picks and prospects to their arsenal, because that's just in the position that they're in right now. So yeah, I'm still 100% on board with them moving out as many bodies as possible and trying to fall in the standings as far as possible.
Well, let's approach those bodies and those names, and let's talk a little bit about the Flames trade deadline. We prep these listeners for the trade deadline coming up on Friday. Let's start with the obvious one, Robert. It's a foregone conclusion. Blake Coleman is going to be moved here. I'm surprised it kind of already hasn't happened this week. I was wondering if Conroy's trying to get these last minute bids to just up his value just a little bit more. The likelihood of Blake Coleman going for me is about 95% here. Anything different for you, Robert, on Blake Coleman? Because this one seems pretty obvious.
I'd be very surprised if he wasn't moved. I'd be super shocked. And I if you take a look at all like those trade bait boards that you see at different publications, I take a look at them and I just think to myself, when I look at the wingers, like there's really nobody that provides what Blake Coleman provides at the level he does. Like I think this is a super desirable player. Not only can he score you at about like a 20 goal pace, but he's got the defense, he's got the physicality, he's got the leadership, the special teams ability. Like he provides so much to a contender that I would be stunned if someone doesn't pay up for a guy like Blake Coleman. And a couple places that I look at, we talked about Carolina last week. I think that makes a lot of sense from a Hurricanes perspective. If the Hurricanes say they're going after Robert Thomas or Elias Pettersson and just can't quite strike a deal, I could see them going and circling back on a guy like Blake Coleman to bring him in. And then, one thing that we saw this past weekend was Kent Johnson as a healthy scratch in Columbus. Is there a deal there to be made? Because Blake Coleman feels like a Blue Jacket to me, just a hard worker, just a guy that would fit in with that group, trying to get them into the playoffs. He adds a little bit of leadership to a young team. Does like a Coleman for Johnson type of trade, could you somehow manage that? Like those are the types of things I think if you're the Flames, you should definitely be exploring. And yeah, I'm with you. I'd be like 99%. Something seriously would have to go wrong in order for the Flames not to trade Blake Coleman. It would be stunning if they didn't do that.
I'm just going to throw something out there. The Islanders are in a spot that no one predicted the Islanders to be in. Do they have an appetite to add? Because I think a Blake Coleman might fit on the island for the New York Islanders. Just a thought I just had.
Definitely a New York Islander for sure. Yeah. He fits the type of hockey that they want to play. And I like that one. I think that's good.
Just looking at the standings and do some thinking. I think Coleman's a good fit there. This one's interesting because this guy, I think Flame fans wanted out about a month ago. And they're kind of mad that he's still kicking around. Where are we at with Nazem Kadri? Because you read all these insiders, you read about him being willing to move. You hear rumors from Drager that he's asked to be moved. You hear from Pat Steinberg that he isn't asked to be moved, but he's willing to be moved. And so it kind of seems like this guy could stay, this guy could go. The Flames should trade him, but are they going to trade him now? What's his biggest value? Nazem Kadri on the market should be, and I think is one of the most sought-after centermen we've had this year, if not the most sought-after one. I know Trocheck's out there as well. I know Riley's out there as well. And then there's the contract side of things as well, Robert. 3 years still to go, $21 million owed in total. It's kind of hard to move. Could be hard to move that in season depending on what you're trying to do with the rest of your roster. If you're an acquiring team, where are you at with Nazem Kadri? Because I can't go more than 50-50 if this guy stays or goes, as much as a trade for him makes sense for some teams. But where are you at with Nazem Kadri and where he could possibly fit in here?
This is a weird one for me because you take a look at all the national insiders, your LeBruns and Chris Johnsons and Darren Dragers of the world. When you listen to them, they almost make it sound like a Nazem Kadri trade is more likely to happen than not. But then if you listen to the local media, basically it's Eric Francis and Pat Steinberg. Both of those guys are in that kind of 50-50 range, maybe even a little bit less than 50% that he gets moved. So there's mixed messaging there from a reporting standpoint. So, I don't really know what to make of it. My personal opinion is that I think Nazem Kadri could really help a team who's ready to win a Stanley Cup either this year or next year. I think he could be a critical piece in getting them over the top. So I look at Colorado, and we heard that Colorado was in the building last night, and I know the Avalanche are in California, but still interesting nonetheless. I look at Carolina as another team that really needs another forward to boost their offense. Could Kadri be a fit there? I just think he's still a good player for at least for this year, and I think next year. I think he can still be a really effective offensive player and can help kind of put you over the top in that 2C position. But it's the following years after that make the deal kind of difficult. But I really believe so. Like a team like Colorado, like they kind of have to start winning now. They're starting to age out a little bit. Cale Makar is going to need a new contract soon. Like they need to really take advantage of this window here. Why would they not give up a first round pick to bring in a missing piece for them? You bring in Kadri to Colorado. All of a sudden, you got Nathan McKinnon, Brock Nelson, Nazem Kadri as your three centers. That's pretty spectacular. Like I don't know if any other team in the league can match that. So why not give up your first round pick and then throw in, a Ross Colton type of guy to make the salary work? Why wouldn't they do that? Why would they hold off on a year when they really need to take advantage of the year they're having and the contract situation they're in? So my gut tells me Kadri will be traded. I just think there's too much value there. I think he's gonna be too big of a piece not to acquire if you're one of those teams who's really starting to get close to a Stanley Cup. So I'm going to predict that Kadri does get moved. A lot of other people don't think it's going to happen. I do. I really do. And if it requires salary attention, it requires salary attention. If it requires you taking a bad contract back, then so be it. I think the Flames really need to cash in on his value and do it while it's at its peak, because I think his value is only going to go down from here. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about it. I know you said you're like 50-50 on it, but what does your gut say on a Kadri trade?
My gut says if a team like Colorado or Carolina that we've been talking about, and you can put other teams up there as well, if they really think that their window to win is this year and next year, then the years 2 and 3 of that deal that's left, the other 2 years, those are future problems, and future problems can be dealt with in other various ways. Those teams can get out from underneath other contracts later on. So I don't think that's as big of a hang up as Pat Steinberg and Eric Francis are making it out to be when you're talking about an Nazem Kadri deal. That's kind of where I side with the national guys, where they're like, yeah, okay, it's very possible to happen. It doesn't take much. Like you mentioned Ross Colton there from Colorado. It has a guy that can be moved back. Like you can take a contract back. So GMs, they worry about future cap space. Absolutely. That's part of their job. But I think if you're in a window to win right now, acquiring Nazem Kadri is almost a no-brainer for some of these guys. You can have the Flames retain. You can do a bunch of different manipulations of your roster and your cap to help bring that player in if you're motivated to make that move. And so if you're Craig Conroy, to help make that move, you need to be willing to take on the bad contract, to take some of the salary back, to maybe take a second round draft pick rather than a first round draft pick if it helps facilitate a prospect or whatever makes this deal work out. I think we need to make sure that we keep our expectations of a deal. Like it's not going to be Michael Hage in a first from Montreal coming back for Nazem Kadri. Make sure we keep our ask in check here what we're thinking of coming back from Kadri, because I think it's more important for the Flames to move off of Kadri for the sake of the kids, the younger players in this lineup, the opportunities for those players as well. So trading Kadri does a couple of things for me. It's going to bring in a couple of assets. It's also going to open up some room for other guys, whether it be Rory Cairns, whether it be William Strongren, whether it is Cole Reshny at the end of the season when he's done his NCAA season, whoever it might be. So there's a lot of things. I think at the end of the day, a Nazem Kadri trade does make and is easier to do in the off season. It does feel to me more like a draft week or free agency week type of trade. So that's my gut, Robert. That's where I'm going to go. I'd love to see Kadri traded before Friday because it makes a ton of sense for the Flames and it makes a ton of sense for a team like the Avalanche, like the Hurricanes. But my gut says, just the way we've heard some things come out, it just feels more off-season move to me than it does in season.
That's fair. Like, you brought up an interesting point there in terms of what's a fair return. What can people expect in a return for Nazem Kadri? And one thing I will say is that I think people do need to kind of have some realistic expectations for this. If the Flames retain salary or they take back a bad contract, I don't think a first round pick is out of question, but I could also see it being a second and a prospect, or like a second, a third, and a B level prospect, like something like that. If it doesn't have a first round pick in it, I don't think it's the end of the world. I still think that trading Kadri, even if you don't get a first round pick, still makes a lot of sense for this team. But I would like kind of temper expectations here a little bit. And you're not, like you say, you're not getting the first and Michael Hage type of return for a soon-to-be 36-year-old with 3 years remaining on his contract. So that's
Yeah,
just kind of
maybe.
the only thing I'd add to that.
Yeah, maybe that deal is Owen Beck and a second round pick. So a former second round draft pick and a second round pick for Nazem Kadri. Maybe it's that type of deal. It's still a good return for the player. And again, I think we need to remember as well that's going to open up the other side of it. That's going to open up your roster for other things to have happen to you, right? So I think the Nazem Kadri deal is interesting because it's going to do a lot for this Flames team, and I think it behooves them to move him sooner than later because it's going to help them do a lot more. People talk about this retaining spot, one left, that you can only do one of Coleman or Kadri, and I don't think that's true at all. I think a Coleman deal can be made without retention until it leaves that retention spot open for a Kadri deal to help facilitate that trade and make it a better deal for both sides of the conversation. I think that's.
I think it's the media is making too big a deal about that because
me too.
Yeah, you can retain on one of them and then you just take back a bad deal on the other.
Yeah,
and Coleman's you could trade Coleman without retention or taking back a bad deal. That contract's not that bad. So yeah, I think it's blown out of proportion.
It is. I think if you go look at the teams that we've been talking about in a Blake Coleman deal, the Islanders or Carolina, I can't speak Carolina, those teams, they have cap room. It's not like Coleman's making $8 million a year. Like he's making a very serviceable contract for the player that he is. That it easily fit in for a lot of these teams looking to acquire him, and it's very easy to work around a deal when it comes to a guy like a Blake Coleman. So, in my opinion, I think the Kadri is the biggest polarizing trade chip out there for the Flames left that conversation. We'll see how that shapes up as well. I'm not sure where you want to go with these next few, but I got a couple other names I want to throw at you, Robert, to kind of see where you are with these guys. Where are you at with, I know where you are at with Ryan Lomberg, but let's have the conversation. The team comes along, offers you a mid-round pick for Ryan Lomberg. What do you do, Robert?
I mean, a lot of people have been bringing up the fact that you could trade him now and then you could bring him back in the offseason.
That never happens.
Mike Gold wrote an article about that at Daily Faceoff, and I think over the last, we'll call it 15 years, it's happened 5 or 6 times total. So yeah, it's pretty rare for that to happen. But based off the comments we saw from Lomberg and Eric Francis's article last week, he's talking about how he'd love to come back to Calgary and he wants to retire here. So if you trade him to a contender now, I do see a realistic possibility of the Flames bringing him back if they want to. So if that's the case, then yeah, I do think if you can get a 4th round pick or 5th round pick for Lomberg and you kind of plan to bring him back in the offseason, then yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. But if you're only going to get a 6th round pick or 7th round pick, I would just sign the guy now. The Flames, between a Coleman trade and you're hoping a Kadri trade, you're going to be adding more draft picks, and you can only have 50 players signed to your organization. So you can't be making 10, 11 picks every single draft because you're not going to be able to bring everybody back. So the Flames are going to have a ton of draft picks. Like, do you really need that extra 6th round pick, that you'd get from a Lomberg trade? Like, why not just re-sign him and then in a few years you could trade him at the deadline then? But I'd like to keep him. I think he's going to be great for the locker room. I think he's going to be a massive part of the leadership core. So I wouldn't deal him, but yeah, if you get like a 4th or 5th round pick offered for him, then I think you have to seriously consider doing it.
I think Lomberg is going to be, and this is going to sound like a mean way of saying it, but I think he's a necessary evil. He's an older player and you're going to need some depth on your roster, but I'd rather have him on my 4th line or my 13th forward over guys like, and all due respect to John Beecher or Justin Kirkland. I think Lomberg is that guy you want in that 13th forward, 12th forward type of role. Good in the room, good in the community. He's good for your younger players. He's energized. He loves the city. And those type of players are valuable when it comes to a younger locker room that the Flames are going to have over the next 3, 4, maybe even 5 seasons. So I think that he's very valuable. So unless someone does knock your socks off, set your price for the guy. And unless someone knocks your socks off, I have no problem keeping this guy around because he's going to fill a role for you that you have and that you need. And a guy like Ryan Lomberg, he's a lot of fun to have around, and he can keep that room light. And when you're having these bad seasons where you're not getting a lot of good results, you can have a guy keep things positive around the locker room. And I think that's going to be important for the Flames to not let a losing culture set into their locker room, but have a positive building culture in that locker room. I think Ryan Lomberg accomplishes that. So I'm okay if they don't trade this guy at the trade deadline. We'll see how much of a demand he actually is going to be in. So I think they also blow this one out of proportion if you're the national media. Yes, just because he's one doesn't mean he's going to be coveted across 31 other teams in the league as well.
Yeah, I agree. And from a culture perspective, you're not keeping Lomberg for like the quote unquote winning culture, because they're not going to be winning. They're going to be losing a lot of games over the next 2 to 3 years here. But it's like you said, it's just keeping the room light, keeping the Dome and eventually Scotia Place a positive work environment, a place where players aren't going to be upset going to work, or there's going to be miserable going to work. This team is they're going to need to have some fun, because losing sucks. Losing is the least fun thing you can do in the NHL, but you have to go about it in a way where you make it, at least somewhat enjoyable to go do your job. And having guys like Ryan Lomberg around, I really think will help with that. So I'm 100% on board of keeping the guy. I actually think he's really important to the future of the team.
Two defensemen that we're going to talk about here. They're kind of, for me, they're the same conversation. Joe Hanley, Braden Pahal, both guys, both depth defensemen, both could be traded, both could be valuable to other teams in the league. Both guys I could see moving, and both guys that maybe the Flames should move based off what we've got as almost a logjam now on the back end for the Flames, in a good way, of course, because they're all younger players. Where are we at with Joe Hanley and or Braden Pahal? Do we see both or one of these guys traded?
It's a good question. I honestly don't know how much value there is out there for either guy. I mean, on the surface, you'd think that Pahal would have a little bit of value just because of how physical he is, and he does play a bit of a playoff style of hockey. And they both have 1 year left on their deal, which might entice teams to want to keep them instead of them just being a rental. They'll get 2 playoff runs out of them. I actually think Hanley's probably the more valuable of the two. I think Hanley's the better player. I think he's smarter, better defensively, makes some better passes, those types of things. I think Pahal is the more physical player, obviously, but I've really liked Hanley's game the last couple years here. I think he's been really, really strong. So if you're Craig Conroy and you can get a couple assets for these guys, I think you have to do it. We've talked about it before. They pick these guys up for nothing off the waiver wire, and if you can turn those 2 players into a 3rd or a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick, those types of returns, I think you have to do it with the position the Flames are in. Then it does open up spots for Hunter Brzustevich and Zane Parekh to get into the lineup. And I think that's important over the last, 25, 24 games here. So I'm all for Conroy moving those 2 guys. I don't know if both are going to move at this deadline. I hope they do for the sake of the Flames' future here. But I think it would be really smart and a good example and use case of asset management if they're able to trade both these guys. So we'll see what happens.
This is where I wish that Brad Treliving had his team in a wild card spot or around a wild card spot, because he loves these type of moves. So if they can get a general manager like Brad Treliving to bite on a move like this, and it's not that I don't like either of these guys. I like both these players. I thought they've been great for the Flames. They've been serviceable for the Flames. Got a lot more out of Joe Hanley than I thought we could as a member of the Flames. But if they can get a guy like Brad Treliving to give them up a 5th or a 6th round pick for these guys, why not move them along? It helps the player have a playoff run, helps your roster open up a spot for a guy like Hunter Brzustevich or others, and it helps out everyone. It helps the Flames get another lottery pick. You've seen what they've done with 5th and 6th rounders as well. So I think it's really good for the Flames if they can move on from these guys. Not because we don't like them, but it's because I think it's best for all parties involved in these guys. So come on, Brad, pick up that phone. The last guy I've got on my list I really wanted to hit on, and I'll let you, if there's any names you have, throw them back at me, of course. We got to have the Zach Whitecloud conversation, Robert, just for the sake of having the Zach Whitecloud conversation. I think you and I have seen this very similar. This is a guy that I think a lot of Flame fans see in this light as well. This was a guy acquired of us, like we mentioned, for Rasmus Anderson, and a guy that a lot of us are just saying, just flip this guy. Just flip this. You probably get a 3rd round pick for this guy. Do it. Bring in another lottery pick. If a team calls and offers you a 2nd round draft pick and a prospect for Zach Whitecloud, Do you take that deal, Robert? Do you hold out for a first, or do you even attempt to even try to move this guy, or is this guy untouchable for you now?
He's definitely not untouchable, but man, I've really, really grown to like this player and this person. He's the type of person you want on your team. You know, really, no matter what stage you are at, like whether you're trying to win or you're rebuilding, he's the type of person you want around. I mean, I've already seen him, you know, just through like the Flames social media. I've already seen him make like 2 or 3 appearances in the community doing doing charitable work already, and just the way he talks about the city and the team and all that kind of stuff, the way he treats people, how respectful he is, and what a good player he is on the ice. I mean, there's so many aspects to Zach Whitecloud that you love. And yeah, like you said, when the Flames first made the Rasmus Andersson trade, I was 100% on board with flipping Zach Whitecloud. If they could get, say, a second round pick for him at this year's deadline, all of a sudden you got a first and 2 seconds and a prospect for Rasmus Andersson, which is a pretty significant return. But after seeing Zach Whitecloud lineup, seeing what he's like in the community, his personality, and all that leadership and character he brings to the table, I think he's one of those guys that could be really important over the next couple of years, similar to Ryan Lomberg, as just a good, solid veteran presence, a good person in the room, and a guy who can kind of keep things light and make it a good work environment for the Flames. And, you know, I just mentioned in our last conversation there that the Flames, they're going to be loaded up with draft picks here over the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they already have 13 picks in the first 3 rounds of the next 3 drafts. And they're just going to add to that with guys like Coleman and Kadri. Do you really need to add another pick on top of that? Because like I said, you can't draft, you know, 10, 11 guys each draft because you're not going to be able to sign them all. Do you wait till Zach Whitecloud's a pending UFA and then trade him at that deadline and bring in, you know, some more picks for 2028 or 2029, and you get 2 years of leadership and character out of him and solid play on the Flames blue line? I mean, that's the way I'm leaning right now. I think they should keep him. I think they should make him a big part of the leadership group for the next 2 years. And then come the 2028 trade deadline, that's when you move him. And who knows? I mean, the cap's going to rise significantly between now and 2028. Zach Whitecloud makes less than $3 million. So, you know, if someone could bring in a top 4 right shot defenseman who makes less than $3 million with a $110 million cap or whatever the cap's going to be by then, could you get like a first round pick for him potentially at the deadline? Could you even get more value out of him? Because he's going to play a way bigger role in Calgary. And I could see him turning himself kind of similar to Kevin Ball, going from a third pair guy in Vegas to a legit top 4 NHL defenseman. So do you hold on to him and increase his value and take advantage of all the tools that he brings to the Calgary Flames? I think that's how you should go about it. But man, if you're offered like a first round pick at this year's deadline, I don't know how you could say no to that. So part of me, I would say I want to keep Zach Whitecloud. I want the Flames to keep Zach Whitecloud. But if they do get a serious return for him, like a first round pick, then I think he'd have to do it. But I really like the guy, and I want him to keep him. I really do.
Unless you're getting that first round pick or A+ level prospect, like a blue chip prospect, I'm keeping this guy, and I'm keeping this guy for a lot of the same reasons I would keep Lomberg around. This guy's positive. Every time you look at him, he's positive. He's in the community. He knows what it takes to win. At the same time, he's a good leader. He's a good soldier for you. And this is a guy that your younger defenseman can learn from. Who better to teach guys like Jan Kuznetsov how to be an effective defender in this league? A guy who needs to play really good in his own end. Who better than to lead the next group of Flame prospects into the back end? Than what Zach Whitecloud has provided you, and he's already put himself in that spot. I think he already is a leader for this Flames team. You mentioned his work in the community already. That's just the kind of guy he is, and those kind of guys are valuable in your room. The Flames love to talk about winning culture and having the good room culture. If they really do value that kind of stuff, that's what Zach Whitecloud does for your locker room. He helps add to that value, to that good nature of it is. And who knows, in 2 or 3 seasons, if you're trading this guy, maybe you look at this guy as being that defensive leader for a team that finally makes the playoffs in 3 seasons. Maybe that's what his value is at the end of the day. But so I think there's a lot of ways you can go with Zach Whitecloud. So he's not untouchable for me, but it's going to take a lot to get him off my roster this year, and probably the same. I would say the same next year if he continues to play like he's been playing. This guy has been something else since coming over from Vegas, and I'm quite pleased with the return for Rasmus Andersson as well.
And one thing that we need to mention too is that he's not blocking anybody, because what you can do
100%.
is you can move Mackenzie Weegar to the left side, and then that opens up your spots for Hunter Brstevich and Zane Parekh. So I don't think there's an issue in terms of him taking a spot. Also, another thing to consider too is that, the more I watch Zane Parekh, the more I think a stint in the AHL next year makes a lot of sense for him. And if you keep Zach Whitecloud, then you still have like a half decent NHL D core to put on the ice while Zane continues to develop. Like, he's almost a bit of a stopgap for when Parekh is ready to come up and play in the NHL. So, because since Zane Parekh returned to the Flames lineup, I keep thinking his skating, like in terms of his speed, isn't quite where it needs to be, and his strength, I don't think, is quite near where it needs to be. So I have no issue with Parekh spending, the majority of next year in the American Hockey League, and then you don't have to worry about a stopgap or filling in a spot for Parekh at the NHL level. And then when Parech's ready, you bring him up and you throw Mackenzie Weegar on the left, and boom, you're good to go. So I don't think Whitecloud is holding anybody back or taking up a spot, because I know that's been a big talking point amongst Flames fans.
Our Twitters are going to burn because I feel very much the same as you do, Robert. Zane in the A for, I don't know, half the season is not a bad thing. I've never heard anyone complain that they spent too much time in the A for their development reasons. I think it's a great league for him to learn at. Hey, there's nothing wrong with it either, right? There's nothing wrong with it at all.
There's literally nothing wrong with it. And anybody who thinks there's something wrong with it, I would completely disagree with them.
Well, go back and look when the Detroit Red Wings are winning all those Stanley Cups or being in Stanley Cup finals. What did they do with all their prospects? Datsuk spent time in the AHL, just to remind everybody. So nobody is off limits from that league. Any other name we're not talking about, Robert, before we have the conversation what a successful trade deadline looks for the Flames? Any other names that we should be bringing up here that you're interested in talking about the trade deadline? Because there is more guys out there, and the Flames, if they hold a proper fire sale, could have a lot of guys leave here.
The last interesting name for me is Mackenzie Weegar.
Okay,
because we've heard his name get put out there by a few insiders or a few local reporters in their markets, and so here's the conversation. I want to get your thoughts on this. What's Mackenzie Weegar moving forward? Like we've seen this season, I'd argue he's been arguably their worst defenseman this year. I think Mackenzie Weegar has been terrible this year, and just this year he's been great before this. And I'm wondering, is this the start of a decline, or is this just one of those seasons where somebody struggles and they're going to get it back next year, or is this Jonathan Huberdeau where he struggles the 1 year and he just never able to get it back? Is that what we're seeing from Weegar, or do you think he can come back? Because the reason I ask that is, if you think Mackenzie Weegar is starting to decline and you think that his play this year could be something that we see in the future from him, then all of a sudden, if I'm Craig Conroy, I am trying to ship him out of Calgary as soon as possible. But if you think that he's going to come back next year and play like he did in his first 3 years in Calgary, then I think it makes sense to keep him. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts. Like, where do you see the future of Mackenzie Weegar? Where is his play going, and where are you at on his trade status?
You said Jonathan Huberdeau, and I got dropped off my chair. I hope it's not that situation. I really hope this is a blip on the radar. I know he's at that age where you see a lot of defensemen drop off, but this guy's also a late bloomer as well. A lot like Giordano was a late bloomer. Now, he's not the level Giordano was, of course, but he was a late bloomer. I wonder if this is just a blip, and I wonder if it's a situations where his value is not going to go down next year that it is first this year. I don't think, unless he has an even worse season next year. And I just wonder if that value is really worth moving him when he's having a down season, or if you make that bet that he's going to rebound a little bit next year and you move him next year. Because the Flames don't need to move him, and that contract might prevent him from being moved to a lot of places that would acquire a Mackenzie Weegar. So you really are, you asked the golden question, Robert. You really did. What is he moving forward? And that's a hard question to answer, because if this is the fall off and it's only going to get worse from here, good God, let's get out from underneath of it. But at the same time, if this is just that blip and you're actually looking at moving him, would it not be better suited to wait till the off season or next season where people have more room to add this guy, where the contract might be more palatable for certain teams? Because unless someone's going to pony up and take a lot of this contract or all this contract, your retention spots are gone. You're going to use one of those on Kadri and or Coleman. So you don't have retention from McKenzie Weegar. So is someone really going to pony up and take that full contract and full term and give you value for it based on his play this year? I just don't know if you're going to see that. So it's an interesting conversation. It feels like fan chatter to me, honestly, for a lot of it. But I think there is validity moving forward after the season. Do you move on from McKenzie Weegar, and what can you get for the guy? So you just don't know. You just don't know what this player, because it could go one of two. It could go either way. I can really see it going either direction, but I would bet on McKenzie Weegar bouncing back just based off what we've seen in the past from this guy.
And this is why all the managers at the Dome, this is why they get paid the big bucks. They got to make these decisions, and they got to prognosticate, and they got to kind of see the future here. And because like I said, if you're getting the Weegar from this year or anything close to this year for the next 3 or 4 years, all of a sudden becomes untradeable.
Yep.
This year, so when Weegar's been on the ice at 5-on-5, the Flames have been outscored 58-31. When he's not on the ice, the Flames have outscored their opposition 65-62. Like, the Flames are a horrific team when he's on the ice this year, which sucks because, like, I'm a massive Weegar fan. He was literally my favorite player coming into this year, and it's just been a disaster for him. Like, this is worse than Rasmus Andersson last year.
Yeah, it is. It's gross.
So yeah, if they think that this is going to be kind of the future for him, then I think the management team needs to make a very difficult decision and potentially make a McKenzie Weegar trade to take advantage of his value while it's still there. But if they really believe that he's going to bounce back, and I do think he can bounce back, I think he's too good not to bounce back, then I think keeping him makes sense, because trading him now, you're trading him almost at his lowest point in terms of his value. So it's an interesting one. It's a really interesting one because, like I said, is it a Huberdeau situation or is it an Anderson situation? If it's Huberdeau, that means that, for the rest of the contract, he's not going to be the same player, and he might be overpaid. But if it's a Anderson situation, then that means that he can bounce back and have a great year next year. Then that would be fantastic. So I don't know, man. I think it's a really interesting conversation that not a lot of people are having right now.
Yeah, it's a great conversation to have. And it comes down for me, if you're going to trade this guy, you've got to be sure, and you got to find someone who's going to take that full contract off your hands, because you don't have the retention spot for it this season. I just wonder if this is a conversation to have at the draft, to have July 1st when somebody misses out on the quote-unquote big dogs. It's going to be interesting to watch this one going forward, in a conversation that we could continue to have post-trade deadline as well. What the future of McKenzie Weegar in Calgary is an interesting one. What is a successful trade deadline, Robert, for the Flames? I'd like to see, personally, 4 moves, maybe 5 moves if they can find the right deals. I'd like to see them move on from these players we've been talking about: Coleman, Kadri, a Hanley, maybe a Paul. But for you, what is a successful trade deadline look for the Calgary Flames?
I'm with you. I think 4 trades would be awesome. I don't know how realistic that is, because it feels like this deadline, based off like some of the reporting we've seen, that it's definitely a buyer's market, and teams aren't willing to give up the type of assets that maybe they once were. And it just feels like it might be one of those deadlines where not a ton of things happen, and guys like Pahal and Hanley maybe don't move the needle for a contender at the price that Calgary's looking for. So what I think a successful deadline would look like is 4 trades: Kadri, Coleman, Pahal, Hanley. If you could move those 4 guys out the door, I think that would be a massive home run, a massive win for Craig Conroy. Realistically, I don't see that happening. I probably see more like 2 deals. Maybe it's just Coleman and Kadri, but a successful one for me is definitely 4 deals. Try to get a couple first-round picks in there, a couple depth picks, in the 4th, 5th, 6th round for guys like Hanley and Pahal, and then I think you're very, very happy with the work Craig Conroy's done. But I don't know, man. Do you get the sense it's going to be busy? Because I personally don't.
I think we're going to hear a lot, but I don't think we're going to get a lot. I think Flame fans should brace themselves for a Coleman and just one other trade, whether that be Hanley, whether that be a Kadri deal. That one would surprise me, to be honest. I don't see a ton of movement around the league. There's not a ton of names being floated out there, like the same 6-7 names in the rumor mill every week. The Trocheks, the O'Reillys, the Kadri, like that's all we're really hearing about. I don't know we're going to see a ton of movement here because I think teams. I just don't know what it is. It just feels like there's a lot of sellers, not a lot of buyers, not a lot of holes on these teams that are trying to buy. And then for the Flames specifically, I think it almost needs to just be, hey, let's get the business side of things done and worry about the rest in the off season and as they move ahead here. So I really hope it actually is three deals minimum. I'd like to see up towards a 5 for the Flames, but I just don't see it being that busy, even league wide, that busy at all.
Yeah, I'm with you. Even the same thing happens at the draft now too. You get a million rumors and this star player is going to get traded and this star player is going to get traded, and then literally nothing happens. And it feels like that's the direction we're starting to go down here in the NHL. And a big reason for that is a lot of these GMs, they're so scared to make moves. They're so scared to take chances. They're ultra conservative. They're not very creative, if we're being totally honest. So, you take all those things into consideration, and I don't really see, much happening here over the next few days because of that.
All right, one more quick one before we have a little bit of fun here, Robert. Should the Flames be buyers? And what I mean by that is don't go out and blow your brains out, but you hear the market on maybe a Kent Johnson's available or a Shane Wright available, these young centers that might potentially be available. If the Flames made that type of move by Friday, is that a good thing? Do you think the Flames should be a buyer in that sense of the form, or should they just be waiting and wait till the offseason to try to do something else and just try to trap and develop these guys? What would you say if the Flames were a bit of a buyer this week?
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting topic you brought up in terms of, guys like Shane Wright or Kent Johnson. Those are kind of the only two names that I could really think of in terms of young players who might be available. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea a lot because the Flames have a lot of prospects. They have a lot of draft picks. They have a lot of assets that they can use in a trade to bring in one of these younger guys. Is it realistic? I don't know. When I take a look at Shane Wright specifically, I don't know if there's a fit between Calgary and Seattle when it comes to a trade, because everything we're led to believe by insiders is that Seattle's willing to dangle Shane Wright in order to bring a high-end star player to their lineup, and I just don't think Calgary has that. Even with a guy like Nazem Kadri, I don't think he fits what Seattle's looking for in that regard. So I doubt a Shane Wright trade is even realistic for the Flames. But Kent Johnson is super interesting to me. Mm-hmm. He really is this. For some reason, he just has not been able to make it work in Columbus. I mean, last year he was on a 69-point pace over 82 games. He had 57 points in 68 games, and it seemed like he found it. But now this year, he's back in the bottom 6. He's back to being a healthy scratch on some nights, and it just doesn't feel like it's working for him in Columbus. So, like I said, could you throw together a package that includes, Blake Coleman, who I think would fit everything Columbus is looking for, who's really trying to push to make the playoffs? Could you throw together a Coleman and a pick for Kent Johnson or something along the lines of that? That is really intriguing, and that's something that I think the Flames should consider doing for sure. Will it happen? We don't know, but it does seem like every deadline there's kind of one or two trades that come out of nowhere, and a Kent Johnson Flames trade is something that would kind of come out of nowhere. So I'm interested to see how it all plays out. But yeah, I don't know about you. I like the idea quite a bit of bringing in a younger player.
I'm actually for this type of video. I look at Kent Johnson and I'm like, they're different style of players, of course, but he reminds me a little bit about when Sam Bennett first broke into the league. He's kind of on the wing. He played center a little bit. He's up and down the lineup when he, and so has he found a role in Columbus, and would a change of scenery really benefit a guy like Kent Johnson? There's going to be opportunities here for the Flames when they move on from Nazem Kadri to play a younger player at center? Could that be Kent Johnson? Get an opportunity to play alongside some other guys and try to find a role here in Calgary. If we woke up Friday and I saw the news that the Flames acquired Kent Johnson for whatever asking price it is, I'd actually get pretty giddy. I would get pretty giddy about it. And I would go to Twitter and I'd probably defend Kent Johnson like he's Wayne Gretzky, because I'd be pretty excited to see a young center come to Calgary. We all know how hard it is for the Flames to find a center. We've had Joe Newendike and then maybe Craig Conroy in the last 20 some odd years, be a centerman in 30 some odd years, I should say, be a number one center in this league for the Flames. So it would be very intriguing to me to bring in this young player, a young player. And I don't think the asking cost is going to be something that you'd scoff at. I really don't think. These are players that are on the outs for their team. These are players that are being almost shopped around. And so it'd be a very intriguing move. And I think it would fit perfectly as well in the kind of player. We hear Craig Conroy's really looking for these NHL ready now type players in some of these trades he's trying to make. A Kent Johnson, a Shane Wright fit exactly that of what Craig Conroy's looking for. So I think there is a natural fit there. Do I think it's going to happen? No, but man, let me dream just for a little bit longer, because it'd be a lot of fun to talk about Kent Johnson next week's podcast.
It'd be awesome. And the interesting thing is the Flames essentially could give Kent Johnson the opportunity he's never had in Columbus.
100%.
You know, if they bring in a guy like Kent Johnson, you know, I would argue he instantly becomes their most talented forward, or one of their most talented forwards, and you could give him a top line role right away, whether it's at center or on the wing. And you could play him on the first power play unit and put him with a guy like Matt Vigridden, who's a really creative offensive player.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, you know, Kent Johnson goes from playing on the fourth line to being a healthy scratch to playing top line minutes in Calgary. And I really think the kid could take advantage of it. I really do. That's if Ryan Huska allows him to. That's for another day. But yeah, I think it's super exciting. So if the Flames are looking for that, I think it would be really smart and it would benefit them quite a bit.
Everything we're hearing is post-trade deadline. People like Pat Steinberg, post-trade deadline in Calgary, the philosophy is going to switch a little bit towards the young kid. So if that type of move happens, I firmly believe he would get that opportunity, and it would be fun absolutely to talk about. Robert, let's have a little bit of fun here. Let's depress the Flame fans with our next topic here. Flames trade deadlines in the past, they have not been pretty. They have not been great. We're getting really bad trades, depth trades. But in the mix of all that, did you find one that was actually your favorite trade deadline move of all time for the Flames? I have one. I want to see if you found one as well.
Yeah, I would say my favorite's probably Freddie Modine for a 7th round pick in 2011. Oh my God. Do I have a favorite? You know what? It's probably this is going to sound ridiculous, but and I'm being serious when I say it. It's probably when they traded Curtis Glencross to Washington for a second and third round pick. And the reason I really like that deal is because the Flames were in a playoff spot at the time. They were pushing for the playoffs. They had just lost Mark Giordano. So you would have thought that at the time there was no way they were going to trade Glencross. They were going to use him as a quote unquote own rental, because that's just something Calgary would do. But they actually had the foresight to trade Curtis Glencross and get a couple of draft picks. And then they used one of those picks to acquire Dougie Hamilton, which then in turn got them Lindholm and Hanifin and got them 5 good years out of those two players. So just the idea that they were proactive, that they were in a playoff spot, but yet they still sold high on a pending UFA. And like Glencross never played another game after that season. So like it was a brilliant move by them that worked out both in the short term and the long term. And those are the types of trades that I'm a big fan of, because it shows that they're forward thinking, they're smart, they're creative, and they're not worrying too much about the present. So yeah, that deal actually I loved. Even the other one they made in 2015 when they traded Sven Barchi for a second, you know, it wasn't working out for Barchi in Calgary. They get the 2nd round pick and it turns into Rasmus Anderson. So that 2015 trade deadline was actually some brilliant work by Brad Treliving. And then, you know, after that season, he just decided to stop being smart with his deals. Kind of turned into a shit show after that. But hey, 2015 was great. So yeah, what about you when you were looking back on these? Were there a couple that stood out to you?
There was one that goes back, and it goes back to that magical 04 run. The Flames traded at the deadline Mickey Dupont, who at the time was just a prospect in the AHL, undersized defenseman, his kid now is a highly touted prospect, and Mathis Johansson, who was a first-year 28-year-old NHL player. They traded him away, traded both those players away, and acquired a guy who helped that Flames energy / checking line take the Flames to another level. For Sean Donovan, I think that sneakily helped the Flames have a really good run in 04, that line. We rave about third lines nowadays and how great they are, like Tampa Bay's third line, winning a Stanley Cup, what the Avalanche rolled out in their third line when they won the Stanley Cup. Sean Donovan was a sneaky player in that 2004 Stanley Cup run for the Flames. And so I think that for me is a really good, you got rid of an old rookie at 28 years old, a defensive prospect who no one was sure was even going to play in the league at the time. And you get yourself a nice player in Sean Donovan that helped the Flames go on a magical run. So I really like that deal. And then the other one I had, the Flames trade two no-namers, Ryan Wilson and Lawrence Shalott, and a second-round draft pick to the Avalanche for Jordan Leopold. And we all know how important Jordan Leopold was to the Flames for a few years, especially alongside Robin Regeer there for a few years, while those two wreaked havoc alongside one another for the Flames. So there's two that I quite liked for the Flames that worked out for them, the Sean Donovan and then Mr. Jordan Leopold coming back to the Flames.
Dude, Sean Donovan was the man back in the day.
I love that line. That him and Ville Nieminen, man, those two, awesome. Just awesome.
Donovan, he was so fast. Like he's probably one of the fastest Flames of all time. He had scored like some like amazing breakaway goals in 04 using that orange synergy. Like, yeah, that guy was, I loved Sean Donovan. That's a really good one. Even in 04, that season, Daryl Sutter, he made 3 trades. He brought in Marcus Nielsen, Chris Simon, and Ville Nieminen, all guys who ended up playing a pretty big role in that team. So that was actually a fairly successful run there with Leopold, Donovan, and then those 3. Sutter did some nice work there in helping build that 04 team. After that, he did a terrible job. One of the deals he made that still doesn't make any sense to me to this day is when he traded Andrew Ference to Boston. So
I hated that deal.
For Wayne Primo and Brad Stewart. And they got nothing out of Primo and Stewart. Absolutely nothing. And then Ference goes on to be a critical member of the Bruins Stanley Cup championship team and then goes on to be a captain with the Oilers. That was so unnecessary. I will never understand why he traded Andrew Ference that year.
Yeah, me neither.
One kind of interesting part about that deal, though, is that there was a conditional 4th-round pick, and if Brad Stewart did not re-sign in Calgary, the Flames got a 4th, and they actually turned that into TJ Brody. So in the end, it actually kind of worked out for them. But at the time, it was just a complete train wreck.
Yeah, it was awful. All right, we talk about train wrecks, Robert. Let's have at it. What's the worst move in Flames trade deadline history? I claim the Freddie Modine one, so you got to pick something else.
Freddie Modine for a 7th, man. Yeah, that's a legendary trade.
That made no sense at the time. It makes no sense now. It didn't even make sense to Freddie Modine when he got moved. It does make what Jay Feaster, man, that guy he was special.
There's like a few bad ones that stand out to me. I mean, there was the 2010 and 2011 Daryl Sutter lost his mind. That was like the Chris Higgins, Alex Kodalik for Jokinen and Prust. Like, I don't think that helped either team. He brought in Toskala. He traded Faneuf for a bag of pucks. That made absolutely no sense to me. The worst, though, is it has to be the Jarome Iginla trade. One of the worst trades in the history of hockey. They basically held on to Iginla for too long. They got him to a point where he's a pending UFA. He controls the entire process, and the Flames just weren't able to get anything for him. Then you add in the Jay Bouwmeester trade on top of that. 2013 was an epic disaster for Jay Feaster and the Flames. And between that and the Ryan O'Reilly offer sheet and the Kowski situation, like, you can see why Jay Feaster was fired very quickly by Brian Burke back in the day. Yeah, I would go 2013. That was a mess. I mean, there's some other bad ones too. Like, what comes to mind for you?
When Brad Treliving fell in love with depth defensemen and would just trade draft picks for these depth defensemen that never really, like Fantenberg and those type of guys, those ones always drove me crazy because it's like, what are you really accomplishing here? Yeah, he always says you needed 10 defensemen to win a Stanley Cup, and it's like, we're squeaking in the playoffs here as the number 6 seed, barely getting by. We're going to play the Anaheim Ducks, but Fantenberg's really going to push you over the edge, or is he? So those type of moves were the ones that really struck me, is the Flames wasting draft picks on these depth guys. The Freddie Modine one comes to mind, those type of players as well. It's just the hope and a prayer type of trades that always seem to pop up for the Flames when they're in weird spots. When they're first in their conference and they're making moves, or first in their division making moves, those ones, they make sense to you. When you're sitting in the just below the wild card or just below that 8th seed spot, and you're trading away a 5th or 6th rounder for a depth defenseman who doesn't even play for you or doesn't do anything for you, like the Yoki Paka guy comes to mind as well. Like, what are you actually doing? And then I'm also frustrated by the amount of times they traded for Olli Jokinen. And one of those times was at the trade deadline as well. They gave up Matthew Lombardi and some pieces for another spin with Olli Jokinen. It's just like, what are we doing here? So for me, it's not really one trade that gets under my grill. It's the constantness of, no matter if it was Feaster or Sutter or Treliving or anyone else, just wasting an asset just to almost essentially make a trade to make a trade. And those ones always frustrated me, because you could go to the obvious ones, like you mentioned there. The Bouwmeester one was awful. The Ginla one was awful. And those trades are absolutely brutal ones to be made. But it's just like, stop wasting your assets on Freddie Modine, because what's he actually providing in this lineup? What did Fantenberg do? Does anybody remember what Fantenberg did in that playoff, quote-unquote, run?
It was a legendary run. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I really enjoyed him versus Vancouver. That really stuck out for me. It just those ones are the ones that drove me crazy. Just these depth defensemen for no apparent reason.
Yeah, I mean, there's Fantenberg, Derek Forbort, Eric Gustafson. You know, I don't know if you want to throw Michael Stone in there, but Stone for a 3rd and a 5th. Like they're essentially just
and a 5th. Like, that's 2. I like Stone, but 2 draft picks for him, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's not good. And then they buy Stone out, and then they re-sign him. Like, it's just so clunky. It's like, what are we doing here? It's amateur hour.
It really makes you appreciate what Conroy's done with his trades and how he's approached his trade deadline, how he's approaching this trade deadline, where it's like, no, we're gonna have our patience, we're gonna set our price. If you meet our asking price, we'll go ahead and we'll make the deal. We saw that with Lindholm being moved early. Rasmus Anderson moved a little bit earlier in a season. We've seen that as he holds on to guys right to the bitter end. Like, he preaches the patience, and he makes trades that on the surface make a lot more sense than Freddie Modine coming in for a 7th round draft pick just because you're sitting in that 8th spot in the West. So I really appreciate, and looking at these deals made me really appreciate the work that Craig Conroy has actually put into helping this team and making these trades.
Yeah, I agree. So can I just mention some other deals too?
Yeah, no, go nuts. I'm all for lamenting how awesome the Flames trade history is.
I'll do some good and bad, because we got to balance it out a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
So 2014, they somehow, I still don't know how this happened, they got a 2nd round pick for Rito Berra.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Why the Avalanche gave up a 2nd round pick for Rito Berra is beyond me. So like that was actually pretty brilliant by the Flames.
Thanks, Patrick Waugh.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Lee Stepniak for a 3rd. You know, that's a solid sell.
Decent.
So they have 2 good moves in 2014, but then they hold on to Mike Camilleri, which still pisses me off to this day.
Because Brian Burke didn't want to seem soft.
Yeah. And we set an asking price for Mike Camilleri. Nobody hit it. We're not going to trade him. What kind of bullshit mentality is that when you're at the very beginning stages of a rebuild? Like, what an idiot.
Yeah.
That pissed me off.
It doesn't make you sound soft. It says that your asking price was off, and then you try to make a different type of a trade.
Yeah, you asked too much for him, and now you look like an idiot. And now you don't want to
work around. So his ass was like a 2nd and a 3rd. So work around it. Get a 2nd and a prospect. Get a prospect and a 3rd.
Or work just around a 2nd.
Work around your stupid ass and stop being a dickhole about it.
That pissed me off. It still upsets me to this day, because who knows what that pick could have turned into. You just never know.
Yep.
A couple others. A brutal one here. Curtis Lazar. It was essentially Curtis Lazar for a 2nd round pick.
Oh yeah.
What a train wreck. Absolute train wreck of a situation. I mean, good on Lazar. The guy's been in the league for a long time, but to give up a 2nd round pick for a guy who's a journeyman 4th line center, and like, I know at the time they thought, oh, he's got this winning pedigree and he's young and all this kind of stuff, but that was one of the worst trades Brad Treliving made.
He had a winning pedigree because those Oil King teams he were on were stacked in the WHL.
Yeah, and like the 2015 World Junior team, stacked. But he's like, oh, but he was the captain of that team. He's a serial winner.
Sure.
Sam Bennett. If we're talking about some of the worst deals ever made, trading Sam Bennett for what was like a second in a prospect, one of the worst deals in the history of the Flames franchise. Knowing what we know, that Bennett's now played in the Olympics, played at Four Nations, won 2 Stanley Cups, Conn Smythe winner, and you traded him basically for a bag of pucks.
Awesome.
Joke. That's a joke. And then you look at like 2022, they bring in Tyler Toffoli. I actually like the Toffoli trade. I actually thought that worked out pretty well.
Yep.
But then they trade 1 million draft picks for Calle Yarncroke and Ryan Carpenter, who did absolutely nothing. Calle Yarncroke didn't score a goal for the Flames until the very last game of the season, Game 5 against the Oilers. So that, I think they trade a second, a fourth, a seventh for Yarncroke, and then a fifth for Carpenter. You essentially traded half your draft class for 2 guys that did jack shit for you.
See, that goes back to my wasting ammunition just to waste it, right? Like that. Those trades that are throughout the history of the Flames drive me crazy. Like, that these are not elite players, right? Like I don't mind giving up draft picks if we go back to the Kent Johnson thing. If it requires you to give up a second and a third round draft pick for a young center plus, you can understand those. But to give up more than one draft pick for an older Stone, for an older player like a Yarncroke, like, what are you doing? Like just asset management, man. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and like I get the idea for Yarncroke, like you wanted to bring in a 3C, but like, could you not have done better than Yarncroke? Like, what are we doing here? Come on,
especially at that cost.
Couple other ones I'll point out here. Of course, how could we forget the Nick Ritchie and Troy Stetcher for Brett Ritchie and Connor Mackey?
Oh, yes.
Legendary trade.
Blockbuster.
I actually like Stetcher, but man, the rest of that did not work. And then, of course, Nick Ritchie goes on to lose the game in the shootout for the Flames that essentially takes them out of the playoffs. So that was fun. And then, of course, you got your Lindholm, Tanev, Hanifin, excuse me. And then, of course, the blockbuster that worked out really well for the Flames, Nikita Okhotyuk as well. They traded a 5th or 6th round pick for Okhotyuk, who played 5 games in Calgary, then bolted off to Mother Russia. That was bizarre.
Yeah, I didn't get that one either.
And then, this wasn't like a deadline deal, but it was close-ish to the deadline last year. Frost and Farabee for Kuzmenko, Pelche in a 7th, and a 2nd round pick as well. I know we should probably wrap things up here soon, but I'm just looking back on that deal now that we're a little over a year now that deal's happened. Do you think it's a win for the Flames? Like, would you make that deal again? Curious how you feel about it.
I would, because Pelche is no longer in Philadelphia. Mr. Kuz is no longer in Philadelphia. They did nothing for Philadelphia. And so you essentially gave up a draft pick for 2 players that were in your age group. One of them being a center that both had very palatable contracts. Maybe Farabee's making a little too much for some people, but you don't worry about your cap space because where you are. So I would make that trade again, make that bet again, because we've seen brilliance from Frost. And I think both of these players have done more for the Flames than any piece of that trade done for any other team that they've played on since the trade. So I would make that trade again.
My only thought is just, I didn't like giving up the 2nd round pick. Kuzmenko, who cares? Pelche, who cares?
If it was just a second for those 2 players, would you make that trade?
Just because
knowing you needed a center.
The contract and the inconsistency of the players and all that. I don't know. And like the way the Flames draft,
fair.
Maybe you want to hold on to that pick, and I'm torn on it. Part of me likes it, part of me doesn't.
You fence sitter.
I know, I'm the worst. I might as well just quit the podcast forever. I guess okay, I'll have a position on it. Sure, I would do the deal again. Why not? And the thing is, too, if they end up moving Frost and Farabee, they'll probably end up getting more than a 2nd round pick in return for them. So, like, if you can flip these guys, you can actually probably end up getting half decent returns for them too. So in the end, I think you make the move again for sure.
Yeah, you're giving up a 2nd round pick, but you're getting 2 players back, and one of them's a center. And at the time, you needed centers. So yeah. I get the logic behind it. So I think I would make it again. Now, obviously, you would like the good Frost we saw against like the Oilers before the break to be the Frost you're getting more than once every month. But I think you still make that trade and take the gamble on a 25, 24-year-old centerman just for a second-round draft pick. So
yeah. Another thing to keep in mind too is that they were legitimately in a playoff race. Yeah, they were in a playoff spot for most of last season, and I thought Frost and Farabee were upgrades on Kuzmenko and Pelletier, and I actually thought that those two could kind of get them over the edge and actually get them into the playoffs. That obviously didn't end up happening, and they both struggled after coming to Calgary. But I think that was another reason why they made that move. They essentially, like you said, they basically just gave up a second-round pick for two younger guys that needed to change of scenery, try and help push them in the playoffs. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, well, then you can ship them off and probably acquire what you spent to get them. So I guess when you really think about it, when you really do a deep dive into the deal, it actually does make a lot of sense for the Flames. So I take back my fence sitting. I shouldn't have done that. That was stupid of me.
And one last trade to lament here before as we wrap up the podcast. In 1997, the Flames traded back-to-back 40-goal scorer Robert Reichel to the Islanders for the superstar of Tyrone Gardner and a 6th-round draft pick, and Marty McInnis, adding to the Flames' woes of not being able to trade superstars for anything. As much as we like seeing Tyrone Gardner play that game with his Oshawa Generals mask on, he was not worth the price of Robert Reichel.
I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick.
I had to throw an older trade in there just for those older listeners that we have, like myself. That was not a great trade. This has been a ton of fun, Robert, this week on the podcast. Trade deadline is on Friday for those who you do not remember. So tune in Friday to your local, whatever station you want to listen to for your trade deadline. We'll see what Craig Conroy does, Robert. We'll see what kind of moves we get. We'll definitely be back here talking about them next week. In the meantime, where can the Flame fans find you, and what's coming up from you on flamesnation.ca?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of trade deadline content this week. So it'd be looking kind of like what we just did today. It'd be looking back on some good moves, some bad moves, trying to get opinions on what do you think the Flames can get for this player and that player, all that kind of fun stuff. So be sure to follow along for that. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at Ring of Fire CGY.
And I'm Vintage Johnny 84 across social media as well. Of course, the show is Red Mile Rundown. We appreciate you all making us a part of your podcast rotations. Enjoy the hockey. We didn't even talk about the Flames games coming up this week, but there's a few games this week for the Flames as well as they come back home wearing the Blasty jerseys. Excited for that. So enjoy the hockey games. And thank you. We'll see you next week on the show here at Red Mile Rundown.